Hello and welcome back to the F2 show. I'm your host Fraser Ford and I'm delighted to be joined today by Inside F2 writer Ed Spencer, GP Grandstand's Jim Kimberley and Formula One presenter and broadcaster Harry Benjamin. Coming up on today's show, we look ahead to Baku as one of the most exciting circuits on the Formula 2 calendar returns after a year's absence. Our panel discuss who are the drivers and teams to look out for this weekend. And we take a look to the back of the grid to establish whose performances have gone a little bit under the radar so far this season. A lot to get into. I want to start with you, Harry. I don't know if you noticed at the beginning, F1 presenter and broadcaster. How was your first weekend as part of the F1 team in Monaco?
Well, first of all, you have dramatically oversold me, but it was great fun. Yeah, so I've joined F1 to host the coverage of the Porsche Super Cup, which supports F1, has done for years alongside F2, F3. It does eight races this season alongside F1, and that's the full length of the calendar as well. So yeah, first one in Monaco. What a first one to go to. That's a pretty cool one to kick off with, if I do say so myself. And these cars are so cool. Porsche 911 GT3 cars, they're powerful beasts. It's a brand new car for this season as well. So they're even faster than ever. They're the fastest ever they've ever made. And to be on the bill with F1 is always, so cool. But yeah, unfortunately there was an incident for a Frenchman called Jean-Baptiste Simonauer on the way up, first corner, first lap, on the way up through Saint-Devote, and then on the way up to Casino Square. Blocked the track, 30-minute delay, red flag, and then we got the 30-minute race out the way. So if there was ever going to be being dropped in at the deep end and having to fill for time, that was going to be it. But it was so much fun. So I'm really pleased to sort of be a part of the team and looking forward to what the rest of the season holds.
Yeah, remember us when you're famous, because you're doing a great job. Ed, welcome to the show. It seems crazy to say we're a quarter of the way through the season already. How quickly has that gone? But which drivers have impressed you so far this season?
So there's been a number of drivers who have impressed me. If you asked me to name my driver of the first half of the season, I think I'd still be writing chapters worth of pages on who I think has done well and who has not. I think Guan Yu Zhou has so far impressed me most. A lot of people thought that coming into the season it was his last chance. He hasn't shown that kind of pressure with the two wins he's had so far this season, one in Bahrain, one in Monte Carlo. And he really got himself a good haul of points considering his grid position wasn't particularly good in the feature. The others, I'd say, like Théo Pourchaire, only 17 years old, which makes me tremendously old. I don't know what I was doing at 17 years old, but I certainly wasn't driving Formula 2 cars around Monte Carlo. He had a brilliant drive in the feature, and it was a fantastic performance. Really calm, really controlled, and he is probably Zhou's biggest threat.
Jim, you joined us for the Monaco review. 6 entertaining races so far this season, but what's been your highlight so far?
Funny that, because you looked at the first Monaco race where we had, was it this Armstrong on Deruvala as the sole overtake? Yeah, I still found it very entertaining. So I do really agree that 6 entertaining races, but so far it's been fun, isn't it? And it might be something that's going to be in this new format, this 3 race per weekend format. At that first race, safe, bit of a banker, people just want to get points. I don't know if that works with your Robert Schwartzman, who's struggled in some of these, but there have been good races, but those second 2 in particular, yeah, really, really good. But my highlight so far has been that Bahrain sprint race 2 with the 3 Alpine drivers absolutely gunning it. Under the lights as well, watching the cars under lights makes it more special. It's been tremendous. And seeing those guys show the level of maturity that they did, in particular Piastri, who ultimately took the win as a rookie coming in, yeah, it was just edge of your seat stuff, the exact sort of advert Formula 2 needs. And on its opening weekend, it's saying, hey, here we are, we're racing like this, it's going to go like this probably for the entire season. If we can get more of that when we move out of these street circuits, and I know Formula 2 is very street circuit heavy, to have some of these more open racing, maybe at Silverstone, really, really excited. It was a really good show that you put on.
Yeah, it's certainly been a brilliant season so far, and I've really enjoyed it. So let's take a look at the championship standings after round 2 then. Guan Yu Zhou tops the standings after 2 brilliant weekends in Bahrain and Monaco. Rookies Oscar Piastri and Théo Pourchaire are 2nd and 3rd in the standings, and they'll be hoping to put the pressure on Guan Yu Zhou after a strong weekend this coming weekend. In the team standings, UNI Virtuosi are top of the team standings after round 2. They're followed by Prema and Carlin, who aren't too far away either. If you want to see the full standings, you can of course head over to our website, www.insidef2.com. Harry, how impressed have you been with our championship leader, Guan Yu Zhou, so far this season? He's had a really strong start to the season, hasn't he?
Yeah, and I've been impressed, and I was worried actually pre-season. I thought, because he had a lot of pressure on him there's a lot of pressure on him to make this step to Formula One. Alpine, Renault, Formula, of course, have put a lot into him, and there's the big marketplace as well as being, one of the first Chinese driver on the grid to race, and it looks like he's the first Chinese driver in a long while that could do well in the grid as well and be competitive. So he needed to have a good season this year, because this is really his last chance in F2 to make that impact, to make the jump to F1. In my opinion, it's still going to be tough, even though he has now shown that he can win, because that was the big thing on his back, wasn't it, previously? Can he win a feature race? But there you go. So it's definitely a huge sort of improvement and a statement from Zhou, I think, because he's laid the marker down. He's leading the way from the Alpine guys, and that is an absolute must, because Oscar Piastri coming in cannot beat Zhou. He cannot allow that to happen, because otherwise he's going to jump up the pecking order. Whether any of these guys make their way up through the Alpine ranks in what is a bizarre driver program anyway, because there's no sort of end results, it seems. So Zhao's doing all he can. He needs to pick himself up a little bit after Monaco, a bit of unluck towards the middle, obviously got the win, but he could have got more. I think I read an interview earlier, from him saying there was a few team communication errors, especially in that wet race, and could have maybe left with a bit more on there. But he is showing that skill and that experience that he's had to now make the push for what should be, hopefully, a very successful rest of the season for him.
Yeah, absolutely. Guan Yu Zhou's had a strong start to the season, and is, as you said, fellow Alpine Academy driver Oscar Piastri, and also Teo Porcher as well, the youngest Formula 2 winner we've had, second and third in the championship. How impressed have you been with how quickly they've got up to speed, Jim?
Yeah, I feel like I'm impressed, but I feel also that they're almost taking the shine off each other, because you're watching them race and they're ace. Like, straight away, they're jumping in. Pretty much all the rookies coming in, and they are not looking out of place whatsoever. As you look at Formula One, Mazepin seems like he might be a bit out of his depth. Schumacher obviously is in a slow car, can't show his true skill, and Tsunoda had a really strong start. And then you can tell these are rookie drivers. With the Formula 2 drivers we've got, the ones that you mentioned there, and I want to have a shout out, as Ed pointed as well, with Ashore. They're all looking in the right place, which is really encouraging in terms of feeder series prospects coming to Formula One. But like Harry said, I don't know what the end goal, Alpine in particular, but I don't know what the end goal is for some of these drivers, what their next step could be. But in terms of what we benefit from watching this, giving the punditry, giving the commentary, it's brilliant. It really is. So Zhou, third season, and Lundgaard, second season, they're not necessarily, well, Zhou in particular, who's leading the championship, they're not getting outshone by these guys, but they're not stamping their authority on them at all. And Schwartzman, who should be a championship leader really at this point, he's got Piastri in his team who's completely outclassed him so far. And there's been a bit of a misfortune for Schwartzman, especially with the race format. Losing his front wing in the first race of Monaco, that's just going to hurt you the entire weekend. And great fight back on the second race. But yeah, it's brilliant. It's breathtaking stuff, and I'm really, really delighted that Formula 2 has so many good drivers this year.
Yeah, they've settled in effortlessly, haven't they? So it's been really good to see. And Ed, obviously you and I, top of the team standings. How impressed have you been with them so far this season?
Very well-oiled machine. You have to wake up pretty early in the morning to beat the Prema juggernaut, considering how many championships they just wrapped up last year. So Virtuosi have just done tremendously well. They've got two solid drivers, Zhou obviously, and you've also got to think about Drugovich as well. He's picking up the points. Admittedly, it's not been as spectacular the start to the season. We all expected Drugovich to be up there. He's not quite at that level, but Virtuosi are just picking points off, whilst the likes of Prema, they've got Schwartzman, who is really should be doing a lot better. I agree with what Jim has said. He had a tough weekend ahead in Monte Carlo. And ART, they've got Christian Lundgaard, who is dropping points all the time. So it's really no wonder Virtuosi are top of the constructors.
Now, I don't know about you guys, but Baku is my favourite track on the calendar. It's such a fascinating track, obviously such a tight and twisty middle part of the sector, but then you've got a fast sector one and a massively long front straight as well, which is brilliant. So, it always produces good racing as well, doesn't it, Harry?
Oh, I love Baku. Literally, just before we came on here, I was watching back some old races, and there's always carnage. There's always drama. It's just Baku hasn't disappointed me yet, and I hope that continues. And obviously, we're back after a year break, so especially that front straight is just so long. It's the track where I should probably know how long exactly it is, but I don't. But it's the track where if anybody from the back who has had a struggle so far, or who is just not ordinarily at the front, it's the track where they have the most opportunity to make something happen for themselves, because that slipstream is going to be so powerful. And also, this is F2. There's going to be a few collisions. There's going to be somebody hitting the wall in turn 1, 2, or 3, especially as well through that tight sector where they go. Is it turns 5 and 6, I think, or a bit further around than that? No, 8, 9, 10, I think, through that where Charles Leclerc binned it and
the
said,
castle.
The castle, that's it. And then he said, the castle. I'm not from up north.
The Castle of Doom.
The Castle of Doom. It is the Castle of Doom. But, if every corner has something different, and it may look a bit basic when you look at the track map, a couple of right angle corners and that kind of thing. But when you watch the previous races that we've had here, regardless of category, it always throws up something good.
I don't want to big it up too much, and then
it's going to be really disappointing.
I know, but I love Baku. I think it's absolutely brilliant, and it does produce some great racing. And Jim, we've had some brilliant races here, Formula 2, GP2, since we've started going to Baku. Really, what race for you has stood out as being the best race that we've had? Because there's been so many, isn't there?
Well, a lot of it goes before my time, but in Formula 2, but I remember distinctly that first, the well done Baku, welcomed us all that fun when they first went there. And Formula 1, everyone was rubbing their hands with glee, because even myself, not as a GP2, I think it was back then, not as a GP2 viewer, I heard about what happened with the safety car restart. And it's a farce, but it's also a classic bit of history for the feeder series to have these drivers not quite sure what the rules are. Big lesson for some of them. I think it was Giovinazzi that actually was the ultimate winner of that race. That for him, it's almost like the school of hard knocks, and this is how you have to save yourself to win a race at Baku, because that long straight, you've got Harry making some great points, that it's such an odd track, that middle sector is so technical, so visually for us to watch, not particularly spectacular, because you're not going to see any overtakes. If cars are going side by side anywhere around that's something you're going to be, setting a recorder and watching again. But the first and third sectors, top racing. And if we can go back to, I think it's 2016, that first race, anything like that, I'll be delighted to see this weekend.
Giovinazzi did the double there, didn't he? And it was brilliant racing. And Ed, if this is as chaotic as we think it could be, and again, I don't want to big it up too much and it then not to be exciting, but if it is as chaotic as we know it can be, is this the chance for a driver further down the grids, as Harry's just said, to get some points? And are we going to see a team or a driver just simply say, you know what, I'm just going to keep it on the road this weekend and just see what happens? Don't worry about keeping up with the pace. Don't worry about pushing. Just keep it on the track.
I hate to be the downer, but I think experience is going to count. So I don't really see too many of the big guns making too many errors. Baku's one of those. Baku's like a roulette wheel. You never know what you're going to land on. And if you remember 2016, the best moment of that race was the two Campos boys applauding Matsushita being taken out sarcastically on the big screen. But for the sake of television viewers and for our excitement levels, let's hope that the form book gets royally shredded across the Baku castle.
Yeah, I definitely hope so. I think, I honestly can't contain my excitement at this weekend. Jim, Jack Aitken, as Ed's just mentioned, back in Formula 2. How good is it to see him back?
Yeah, it's a funny one, isn't it? Because Aitken's had success, but not that level of high success that's really going to propel him into a Formula One seat. I know he's got that connection with Williams, and it was great to see him in, when I say Formula One seat, of course he made it to a Formula One seat, but a full-time Formula One seat. So to see him racing on the Formula One calendar again, yeah, it's a good news story, really. And we've mentioned, talk about Campos, that he was pushing Campos forwards last year. Was it Silverstone where he got the double podium? It's good to see. It's great to see him. It's great to see drivers who genuinely deserve a place on the Formula 2 circuit there. So him coming back, what seemed very last minute to Monte Carlo, was great to see. So with a bit more preparation, I'm hopeful we're going to see some points scored for him this time out at Baku. And he just seems like a jolly nice chap. And I know that sounds very twee and very British and might be a bit too my compatriot, come on, Aitken. But I like to see, and we mentioned Boschung as well, I like to see nice guys have the chance to be racing. So it's a bit of an underdog story, but hey, we are Brits here, and that is what we love. So I really like that Aitken's back, and I really hope it's not going to be a championship challenge, but I really hope that if this might be his last year in Formula 2, I really hope it's a good one where he does get on the podium. And yeah, I think it's great. Could maybe see him on the podium even this weekend.
How good would that be? I mean, he actually, for Campos in 2019, last time we were at Baku, I mean, he won the feature race and he got on the podium in the sprint race. He almost did the double wing in a Campos, didn't he? Can he score points this weekend, Harry? Can he contend for a podium?
In terms, I think he'd probably do points, yeah. But I mean, let's not forget, he's coming in quite cold. He's not racing any other single seaters right now. He's doing GT, so that's a big switch for these drivers to come back in and get to grips with. I think he's doing probably a little bit of testing and simulator work with Williams, perhaps. But he's especially at this track, he's got good rep here, but that was 2 years ago now. So he's with HWA Race Lab. They haven't got exactly the fastest car on the grid, or they're not getting that speed out of the car right now. So I mean, I'd love to see Aitken on a podium. Of course. Do I think that's realistic? No. If he stays in for the whole season, which again, I don't think is confirmed, but if that, and I imagine that if they find somebody else who wants to do the rest of the season and who's going to pay enough money to do it, Aitken will just be in for Baku, and then he'll go back to doing GTs. But if he can get, a solid top 10, top 5 result, I mean, that would feel like a win, I think, coming back into the HWA team for a one-off race.
Yeah, it really would, wouldn't it? If he is in for the whole season, are we looking at potentially, if George Russell is off to Mercedes, there's a seat vacant at Williams, are we looking at between him and Dan Ticktum for a Williams seat? And could it potentially harm his chances of potentially getting a Williams seat next season?
I don't know is the honest answer. I just can't see. I just don't think they'll pick him. I just don't think they will. As probably, I know there's so many Jack Aitken fans out there, and they probably all hate on me now, but I just don't see that happening. Dan Ticktum is on a roll with it, I suppose, at the moment. And he's openly admitted that this is his last chance to make the jump to F1 this year. He thinks, otherwise he's leaving F2 and going to focus probably sports cars or something like that. But they've got a lot of people vying for that seat, and don't forget, Roy Nassani is getting a lot of seat time in that Williams right now, fresh off the back of a podium in Monaco. You never know, but I just don't. I would love to see it. I don't think that will happen, because if there is suddenly a big move like that in F1, there'll be a huge knock-on effect for the likes of Bottas, for the likes of what happens to Vettel at Aston Martin. Does he want to stay? Does he? Williams are not going to miss out on the chance to maybe snap up Valtteri Bottas again, because he's a great driver, and they've got a great rep with him. So I could see that. I could see a swap there if we're talking about the F1 move. When it comes to Aitken, I just don't think I think he's had his shot, and I don't think it will come again. No,
that's fair enough. It's you are going to get a lot of hate after that, Harry.
I know.
I'm just composing my tweet now, actually.
He's a great driver, don't get me wrong, but some of the best drivers still don't make it to F1.
That's very true. Take Callum
I'm not going to say what I was going to say there. My number one my number one driver, who I support through and through, Mr. Paul Di Resta. I've got a picture of him just up there. He's a top-notch driver, and he got his chance in F1, yeah. But he showed what he could do, but still binned off. So you could be the best of the best, but you got to have all the other things to come together as well.
You are right. It's the complete package, isn't it? And obviously, return to Formula 2 for Jack Aitken was due to Matteo Nannini pulling out due to financial issues, focusing on his Formula 3 season. How disappointing would that be for him, Ed?
It was more disappointing for me because I had that video interview aged like warm milk. I'm disappointed for Matteo. I really think he earned his stripes. He had a good start to the season in Bahrain. A point is a good start. He could have had 2 points finishes if the stewards had decided against giving Lundgaard his second place back. He'll be back. That's all I'm going to say. And I think with F3, he'll get more time to mature, more time to get inside the HWA family. So I'm confident that we haven't seen the last of him. But unfortunately, it's another case of money talks.
There are a number of drivers who are obviously in the same position, signed up probably to a race-by-race contract and potentially not being able to complete the season. Does that put added pressure on a driver, or does that push the driver onto that next level to keep their seat, Harry?
I think it's the more time that has gone on in the last few years, the more stuff like this happens, there's a lot more access to how motorsport works and the ins and outs of contracts and stuff like this. But race by race contracts in F2 in particular, I don't think there's something particularly new. I just think we're now getting a bit more of an insight into who might not have a race seat for the next round. I think there's always pressure for these guys. They are, especially for the top elite ones, they're always going to be at the top of their game, and they're all trying to be. These guys, they are in F2, they are still learning, but they are making their way up, and the next stop is Formula 1. So they know that they've got eyes on them, and they know they need to perform at their very best. In terms of, does having a race by race contract add a bit more pressure? Maybe, yeah, I'm sure it does, because they're going to want to try and perform as best they can. But at the end of the day, they could perform as brilliantly as they can. But come back to my previous point, if they ain't got the cash, they're not going to race. Simple as, and that is something that ultimately can just be a little bit out of grasp, even if you've got great results behind you. If it's about marketability, it's all these things that come together to secure that sponsorship. And for the race by race guys, they're just going to have to do their very best. That's all they can really do. It's almost, actually, I could argue, it takes the pressure off slightly, because they can just go out and do as best as they can, and the rest is out of their hands, really. They can do no more.
Yeah, I mean, Richard Verschoor is one of those drivers on a race-by-race contract, and he's, top 10 in the championship. I think he's P9, and he's had a really strong start to the season. Is that something that is bad for Formula 2, isn't it, Ed? That if you've got drivers who are delivering, but they're not going to be able to stay in Formula 1 because financially they can't stick with it, it doesn't look good, does it?
It doesn't look good, no, and it's been a constant problem for the junior categories for years. And there was guys like, I can remember Oliver Tichy. He did quite well in the 90s, never drove again after that good result. And then you've got guys who are trying to make that jump to Formula 1, never end up making it because they don't have the money. And then you have guys who have got a rich parent, can get them in. So it's terrible for the sport that guys like Verschoor, Nannini, potentially Ralph Boschon, we never know what's going to happen with him. That we don't have these guys racing, yet you see pay drivers who have no real sense they're going to make it. They're never going to become the next Pedro Diniz, and they're out of a drive, and they never actually achieve the results that you would expect from a car like that. You do have to wonder how these guys find a budget to race. It's crazy to think. We complain about the cost of Formula 1, and yet guys in Formula 2 are chucking this much money for a car that's not particularly fantastic. You can understand why pay drivers get in and the talented guys don't.
My argument for that is, I mean, I agree with you to a certain extent, and
okay, that's good.
But this is motorsport, and isn't everybody a pay driver, regardless of where you get the money from, whether it's Daddy Stroll or whether it's Red Bull? Somebody is paying for you to be there, and go up the ranks. So my argument is everybody is a pay driver, from Guan Yu Zhou down to Alessio De Lada. Guan Yu Zhou just gets it from Alpine. De Lada gets it from, I don't know who he gets it from, but it's not a manufacturer, is it? So there's the argument to be had, I think, that, if you're going to go racing, you're going to be parting with loads of money. And being a pay driver doesn't necessarily, I think this is where the disparity comes from, that being a pay driver does not mean you're a bad driver, because Lando Norris is incredibly wealthy. During his F3 campaign, he had so much external testing, way more than any other drivers were having in that car, so he could get up to speed. And of course, the more you go testing, the more you're going to understand, the quicker you can potentially be. But he could only do that because he had lots of funding from not actually McLaren, but from his father. So, there's the argument that Lance Stroll also, I wouldn't call him a bad driver. Lance Stroll stood on the podium in Formula One. Not everyone can say that. So my argument is that pay driver doesn't necessarily mean you're a bad driver, but everybody's a pay driver, in my opinion. It just comes down to all these other factors that are sort of controlling this massive strings that none of us can see, but we all know are slightly there.
Now, the one thing that I would like to say, though, is that we're watching Formula One, which has always been, and I think, Harry, you've got the nail on the head, it's just more exposed now, but it's always been a rich man's sport. Back in the 50s, there wasn't the working class kid who was turning up, driving fast at a go-karting track, and then the Ron Dennis of his day saying, you know what, you're going to be the one. It's just been rich. The whole point of Grand Prix racing was rich people wanted to show off, getting cars through however they could, be it manufacturers or constructors like Williams, and then racing. And we've watched rich people racing for a very long time. So it's just the exposure to it now that we can see with a bit more transparency how it affects some drivers. And we dread to think, I didn't watch Formula One or any racing in the 70s because I wasn't around, but how many drivers could have made it who didn't, just because they didn't have the money to do it, and nobody knew. They'd have read it in the paper, such and such isn't racing this weekend, such as is racing this weekend. They've thrown their life savings to try and get a seat in a Formula One team. They've had one weekend, they didn't make it, end of that guy's story. Just now we have all this exposure to it because of the internet, because of social media, that we can see the likes of, say, Callum Ilott, who couldn't afford a second season, Ferrari backing or not, they couldn't get another season in Formula 2, financial issues. And we now get frustrated as fans thinking, I like that guy, but it's still the same sport. We are just way more exposed to it.
Yeah, completely agree. And if I had £500,000 lying about, I would definitely invest in some form of racing, 100%. Well, you would, of course you would. If you've got a passion about it, you would. So I don't want us to be a bashing of paid, where they get their money from, but if you've got it, you may as well use it.
It's like the classic football line, isn't it? If I hadn't injured my knee, I would have made. If I had a budget, I'd have been a Formula One world champion. I would have, I promise.
Yeah, you're right. You're half right. Yeah.
Ralph Boschung, another one of those drivers, Ed, you've already alluded to, a really good weekend in Monaco. Jim, I know you were impressed with him. You spoke about it on the Monaco review. Is that Monaco weekend, is that something that he can build on? And can he be in the points again this weekend in Baku?
I'd love to see him get his groove on again. I love Ralph Boschung. Similar to what we talked about with pay drivers, this guy's having to hustle to get the sponsorship to not be a pay driver because it's not coming from his own wealth. But I remember the press release when he said, I'm back for next year and I'm back because I've got sponsorship for the entire season. Like, that's a big deal. And these are the sort of things that you're not exposed to before, like we mentioned as well. Before, in olden times, it's just the drivers in or out. So for Boschung to come back, and then his second weekend back, I know he raced Bahrain last year, Sakir, whichever one it was, but from this full season return to come back in his second weekend to do as well as he did, it was great. It's great to see. Whether or not that's a bit of the Monaco effect, where overtaking can be difficult, and he's got some experience which has helped him, I don't know. And that long straight down Baku, it's going to be some people's saving grace and some people's hindrance. And Formula 2 cars are so restricted in what they can change setup-wise. having any wing adjustments maybe could be the difference depending on how the car is set up, or how, if you're Deruvela, how your engine is going to work. So I don't know. And it's such a cop-out answer. I think it's going to come down to qualifying. If Pochong can qualify well, then anything's possible. But as we mentioned in the excitement for Baku this weekend, there are going to be retirements. And if there are going to be retirements, keeping your nose clean could really be a way for you to be gaining a whole bunch of points. Whether or not it gets 3 races in a row scoring high points, I don't know. But certainly, yeah, I think we'll see him in the points with a decent chunk again, at least one time this weekend.
Trident are a team who's obviously had a bit of a difficult start to the season as well. Only scored 1 point so far this season. That was courtesy of Marino Sato in Bahrain. I caught up with Trident driver Bent Viscal to get his thoughts ahead of the weekend in Baku. What are your expectations going into the weekend? And do you think that big points are up for grabs, maybe even a podium if there's a chaotic race?
Well, I watched a few races back, and it definitely didn't look like a sort of train like it looked like in Monaco. The long straight is very interesting, just as the safety car restarts can be a bit of a interesting one as well. But yeah, in general, I just need to improve qualifying and get to the front of the grid, and then see what happens from there on. And of course, I will be more experienced on the street track after Monaco, so I think that will also help a lot with the confidence.
Yeah, of course, yeah. And I believe it's your first visit to Baku as well. The team have been quite successful in the past. They've had points with Arjun Maini and Santino Ferrucci finishing 5th and 6th in the sprint race in 2018. How much do you rely on the data and the feedback from the team in terms of a setup, for races that you've never been before?
That's the only sort of feedback or like information I have, so I need to work as much as possible from that data of the past in order to prepare myself as well as possible for the first lap in free practice. And then from there on, we just need to develop and learn from the mistakes the team and in general the drivers have made, and try to not make them again. And then just learn as much as possible.
Harry, how do you think both Bent Viscal and Marino Sato, how do you think they're doing this season in Formula 2?
It's tough because I actually had decent hopes for Bent Viscal. I thought, he showed quite a bit of promise sort of coming in. And he's come within, touching distance several times, hasn't he, of points? And, you just seem like they need to get into a bit of a rhythm. I think they're missing that rhythm of consistency. And Trident have struggled in, on and off. They've not been consistent in their campaigns throughout the years, dating back to GPT. They've had great success and then they've had nothing. So I think something's especially with Marino Sato as well, coming in, he's got an 8th place to his name, hasn't he, which is a great result for him actually, but the rest of it hasn't been he's actually not been within touching distance actually compared to Bent Viscal in terms of finding that top 10 route. But I think I'm finding it difficult to really have much hope for the rest of the season. There needs to be a big change, something needs to change dramatically, and this is Formula 2. As Jim said, it's not a lot. It's not like you can do a lot with the cars, is there? So it comes down to sort of those minute margins and driver performance here. And Sato hasn't delivered, I don't think, properly on some of his previous feeder series promise. So this is a make or break season for him as well, I would suggest. So they need to capitalize. If they can capitalize in Baku, they might be able to get back on the front foot. But at the moment, they're very much on the back foot.
Yeah, I think Trident will be hoping for a bit of a chaotic weekend, and they can, capitalise on that, won't they? Roy Nassani, obviously a podium in Monaco, a strong weekend actually overall in Monaco. But his teammate Marcus Armstrong hasn't had the best of starts again, quite similar to last season actually. He's got that pressure of being a part of the Ferrari Driver Academy. It's pressure, and it's also it can be beneficial as well. And how do you make of his season so far? And does he need a good weekend this weekend in Baku?
It's a lot of good weekends, not just in Baku. It's a bit of championship start to forget. We mentioned Schwartzman and fellow Ferrari Academy driver and how much of a struggle he's had. Prema, you expect to be at the front. Dams, you kind of expect to be thereabouts. Of late, maybe not fighting up at the front as much as they want to be. But yeah, he needs to really enjoy a bit of either good fortune or just find some outright pace this weekend, because it's such a strange season, as we're going to continue mentioning, that, I mean, well, I'm just looking at the calendar now. After Silverstone, which isn't far away, it's like, that's half the season done then, guys. We're a quarter of the season done now. We've had 2 weekends. It's absolutely bonkers. So if you're looking at a third or more of the season gone, which it will be this weekend, and Armstrong hasn't kicked into gear and he's in 15th in the championship, 1 point scoring race so far from 6, what happens next? It's not what's going to be good enough for him. It's not what's going to be good enough for Ferrari. And yeah, it's going to be huge pressure on him. And it's going to be important not to get your head down and feel like, what am I doing here? And in order to start feeling back on top, he needs to really show that he's the top dog at Dams, because everybody expects him to be. And so far, we haven't really seen it. So yeah, for Marcus, he needs to turn up.
It's a confidence thing, isn't it? He has the ability. He's shown that in Formula 3. Harry, can he refine that confidence and can he, put a few races together really and have a really strong second half of the season?
I mean, I really hope so. He's got it in him. We know that, but he's just. I don't think I can add much to what Jim said, to be honest, because it's just been a championship start to forget, really, and with that pressure of the Ferrari backing it. They're going to be expecting more, and and we look further up, and Robert Schwartzman has had a tough start as well, but he is still 6th in the championship, whereas Armstrong is 15th. That is just looking purely on paper and numbers. That is not good enough. That is not what they want from a Ferrari-supported driver. So if he can turn it around from Baku and have point-scoring podium races for the rest of the season, then I think he can just about save it. But if not, then I'm afraid, it's a cutthroat business, and Armstrong needs, the one thing about Armstrong is he's got decent backing. That's his, help saving grace. But and he is a good driver as well. Something's just not going right for him at the moment. He's a mixture of bad luck and poor judgment sometimes as well. But he's got it in him.
Yeah, let's hope he can turn things around. And Baku, as we said, anything can happen. So who knows where he might end up. Now, question time for our panel now. Quick fire questions, guys. They're going to come at you quick. So we'll go Harry first, then we'll come to you, Ed, then we'll come to you, Jim.
I'm terrible at these.
I know you are, Harry. I know.
This is going to be a disaster.
No, not a quiz. Not a quiz. We're okay.
Right,
so, Harry, your driver to watch this weekend?
Ooh, okay. I would say Jack Aitken. Oh, that's come to my mind first. Yeah, Jack Aitken. Go on. Yeah.
Ed?
After my damning report.
I'm gonna send some love tweets now after that.
He wants a place in his management, that's for sure.
Ed, who's your driver to watch this weekend?
I'm going to go plain boring. Let's go Drugovich. It's time It's time for him to shine now, and I think a good result could be on the cards in Baku.
And Jim?
For me, the driver to watch is Christian Lundgaard. That he is somebody who's suffered misfortune and had that engine issue. So actually, I want to apologise a little bit to Armstrong, because of course he had that issue as well before the start of Sprint Race 2, where he was just starting pole position. It could have been a whole completely different thing. But yeah, I think Christian Lundgaard, luck will even itself out, and it's about time it starts evening itself out for him, because he's not a slouch and he's been very unlucky.
Yeah, he really has, hasn't he? And that engine, he was running P2 at the time, wasn't he? So that was really unlucky for him. Question number 2, how many different drivers are we going to see on the podium this weekend, Harry?
Well, there'll be at least 3 different drivers. But if you want an actual slightly more intellectual answer, I'm going to 7 is a number that popped into my head straight after 3. So I'm going to go for 7.
7 for Harry. Ed, how many for you?
I'm going to go 8. I think the roulette wheel known as Baku will swing into action, and we will see a good haul of drivers getting a trophy in their luggage.
Jim, how many are we going to have on the podium?
I'm going to split the difference, say 7.5. No, I don't know. 9 would be great. I'd love to see 9 drivers. So let's go all the way out there. 9 different drivers. It's going to be a wild weekend in Baku.
It's going to have to be a wild weekend to have 9 different drivers on the podium. Ed, who's going to be our championship leader by the end of the weekend?
Very boring. We're going Guan Yu Zhou to maintain his championship lead, and he will be extending it.
Harry?
I'm going to be boring and also say Guan Yu Zhou.
He's a long way ahead. Jim?
Zhou, if I were to be a betting man, because it looks like a safe bet, but Piastri has shown a lot of consistency, and I really won't be surprised if we see him just about edge Zhou out by the end of the weekend.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see. Bring on Baku. That's all we have time for today. Ed, Jim, Harry, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. We will, of course, be back for next week for the review show of round 3. So keep an eye out for that. In the meantime, if you want to get involved in the conversation, you can join us on Discord. You can, of course, follow our social media channels. You can find the link to all of those on our website, or you can find them below. If you enjoyed the show, please make sure you hit the subscribe button, give this video a like, and leave a comment in the comment section to let us know what you think of the show. But from me, Fraser Ford, and all of us here at Inside F2, we'll see you next time.